Hello, it is me, Peter the Grease. I may have surprised you for that Halloween treat, but we are actually here on October 29th. Today is a Thursday. When I was a kid, I used to love watching all of the different Halloween specials. The Paul Lynde Holiday Special for Halloween, Star Wars Holiday Special for Halloween, and my favorite of all, Mary Martin and Peter Pan Halloween. For all of these specials, they used a television multi-camera setup. One unfortunate thing about my predicament is that I only have one camera. That said, from a lifetime of watching these shows, I'm very used to the way that the presenter is able to approach different sections of the audience by turning their head towards one of the other cameras. I hope this will not impede your enjoyment of the Peter the Grease Halloween special. As you can see, I've taken lessons on the organ. My father used to play the Wurlitzer, the mighty Wurlitzer, at the Lowe's, Jersey City. He would often tell me about the times that he would meet Douglas Fairbanks, the great swashbuckler. And Douglas Fairbanks would say to him, "Hey, aren't you Peterford the Grease? The same Peterford the Grease that plays the mighty Wurlitzer at the Lowe's, Jersey City?" And my papa, he would say, "Could it be anyone else, Doug?" They were on pretty close terms at the time. I don't know what happened to that guy, but I heard he had a son. Things are pretty tricky right now. There's an election on. I voted today. I went to the early voting. Everybody wore masks on account of the current pandemic you may have seen about in the newspapers. But the poll workers, who I applaud heartily, did their best to keep people safe and informed. And I appreciate that very much. In case you were wondering for whom I placed my vote for the election, I chose Joseph Biden and Kamala Harris to be the president and the vice president, respectively, of the United States of America. As I said in my popular Instagram video,
"If you vote for anyone else, you're a racist. Fuck you."
I'm trying to get my fog working. You might not have known this, but when I was a kid, I was a roadie for Foghat. Well, now that we are perfectly all fogged up, I think it's time for us to get to the main event. Scary stories. The Halloween season is always a time when we sit with our friends, our relatives, and our neighbors and share some of our favorite scary stories. Me as a greaser, I know many of the scariest stories come from, "Hey, did that ghost just take that ball bearing?" Or my favorite, "A goblin in the fender." But we're going to read some more relatable ghost spooker stories today for you for Halloween. I have some books They are written by Alvin Schwartz with drawings by Stephen Gamble. These are scary stories to tell in the dark. More scary stories to tell in the dark. Scary stories, 3 more tales to chill your bones. If you were like me, you first encountered these books when your son brought them home from the Scholastic Book Fair, and you said, "Son, what are you doing with these spooky books?" And your son looks at you and says, "Daddy, these aren't scary books, they're just all make-believe." That's when I knew what a book was. And as you may have seen in my recent Instagram content, I now know how to read myself. So I asked my son, "Hey son, can I borrow your books?" And my son said, "Yeah, Dad, please take my books. I want you to read them." So I'm gonna do some reading now. These are some pretty scary stories. Would you like me to read one to you? I said, "Would you like me to read one to you?" I said, "Would you like me to read one to you?" Okay, I'll read you a scary story. This one's called The Viper. You know, with the bucket and the rag, he could be a greaser. A widow lived alone on the top floor of an apartment house. One morning, her telephone rang. "Hello," she said. "This is the Viper," a man said. "I'm coming up." Somebody is fooling around, she thought, and hung up. A half hour later, the telephone rang again. It was the same man. "It's the Viper," he said. "I'll be up soon." The widow didn't know what to think, but she was getting frightened. Once more, the telephone rang. Again, it was the Viper. "I'm coming up now," he said. She quickly called the police. They said they would be right over. When the doorbell rang, she sighed with relief. "They are here," she thought. But when she opened the door, there stood a little old man with a bucket and a cloth. "I am the Viper," he said. "I wish to wash your windows." Because he's viping them. Pretty good. I'm gonna read a little more. This is a good story. This is a story for everybody here that missed the big games this summer because of on account of the pandemic. The bad news. Leon and Todd love baseball. When they were young, they had played on the town's baseball team. Leon had been the pitcher, and Todd had played second base. Now that they were a lot older, They spend their free time watching baseball games on TV and talking about baseball. Do you think they play baseball in heaven? Leon asked Todd one day. That's a good question, said Todd. The one who gets there first should let the other one know somehow. As it turned out, Todd got to heaven first, and Leon waited patiently to hear from him. One day, Leon found Todd sitting in the living room, waiting for him. Leon was very excited to see him. What is it like up there? He asked. And what about baseball? When it comes to baseball, said Todd, I have some good news and I have some bad news. The good news is that we do play baseball in heaven. We have some fine teams. I play second base on my team, just like I used to in the old days. That's the good news. What's the bad news? Asked Leon. The bad news, said Todd, is that you are scheduled to pitch. The bad news, says Todd, is that you are scheduled to pitch tomorrow. I like the cover of the third book. It's got the three guys whose the faces is kind of like the same face. You know what? I don't want another scary story. These scary stories are making me feel a little too scared. I'd like a happy story. In fact, I'd like my favorite story. Corduroy by Don Freeman. Corduroy is a bear who once lived in the toy department of a big store. Day after day, he waited with all the other animals and dolls for somebody to come along and take him home. The store was always filled with shoppers buying all sorts of things, but no one ever seemed to want a small bear in green overalls. Then one morning, a little girl stopped and looked straight into Corduroy's bright eyes. "Oh, Mommy," she said, "look, there's the very bear I've always wanted." "Not today, dear," her mother sighed. "I spent too much already. Besides, he doesn't look new. He's lost a button to one of his shoulder straps." Corduroy watched them sadly as they walked away. "I didn't know I'd lost a button," he said to himself. "Tonight, I'll go and see if I can find it." Late that evening, when all the shoppers had gone and the doors were shut and locked, Corduroy climbed carefully down from his shelf and began searching everywhere on the floor for his lost button. Suddenly, he felt the floor moving under him. Quite by accident, he had stepped onto an escalator, and up he went. Could this be a mountain, he wondered? I think I've always wanted to climb a mountain. He stepped off the escalator, and as it reached the next floor, and there, before his eyes, was the most amazing sight. Tables and chairs and lamps and sofas and rows of beds. This must be a palace, Corduroy gasped. I guess I've always wanted to live in a palace. He wandered around admiring the furniture. This must be a bed, he said. I've always wanted to sleep in a bed. And up he crawled onto a large, thick mattress. And at once he saw something small and round. Why,
"Here's my button," he cried, and he tried to pick it up, but like all the other buttons on the mattress, it was tied down tight. He yanked and pulled with his both paws until pop off came the button and off the mattress. Corduroy toppled, bang, into a tall floor lamp. Over it fell with a crash. Okay. I'm sorry. This part. Can you see it? Oh, you need some light. This part. Every time I read this book, I think this is a cop. I don't care for them. But it's not a cop. It's a toy store security man looking for the corduroy. Now, to be quite honest, I think it's not so great to dress up as a cop. Not that this is a cop, but it kind of looks like one. I think the security man should speak to the board of his union and his representatives and ask them that they demand a uniform that doesn't look like a cop. Because in my favorite book, I don't want to be looking at anything that looks like no cop. Because between you and me, they're up to no good. Corduroy didn't know it, but there was someone else awake in the store. The night watchman was going his rounds on the floor above when he heard the crash. He came dashing down the escalator. "Now who in the world did that?" he exclaimed. "Somebody must be hiding around here." He flashed his light under and over sofas and beds until he came to the biggest bed of all, and there he saw two fuzzy brown ears sticking up from under the cover. "Hello," he said. "How did you get upstairs?" You see, listen, no cop would have been that nice to a bear. You know, I like this guy. He just wants to say how Corduroy is doing. Hey, he's holding Corduroy now. The watchman tucked Corduroy under his arm and carried him down the escalator and set him on the shelf in the toy department with the other animals and dolls. Corduroy was just waking up when the first customers came into the store in the morning, and there, looking at him with a wide, warm smile, was the same little girl he'd seen only the day before. "I'm Lisa," she said, "and you're going to be my very own bear. Last night, I counted what I've saved in my piggy bank, and my mother said I could bring you home." "Shall I put him in a box for you?" the saleslady asked. "Oh, no, thank you," Lisa answered, and she carried Corduroy home in her arms. She ran all the way up 4 flights of stairs into her family's apartment and straight into her own room. This part is very personal for me because I live on the 4th floor and I have to take the stairs. Corduroy blinked. There was a chair and a chest of drawers, and alongside a girl-sized bed stood a little bed just the right size for him. The room was small, nothing like that enormous palace in the department store. "This must be home," he said. "I know. I've always wanted a home." Lisa sat down with Corduroy on her lap and began to sew a button on his overalls. "I like you the way you are," she said, "but you'll be more comfortable with your shoulder strap fastened." "You must be a friend," said Corduroy. "I've always wanted a friend." "Me too," said Lisa. Gave him a big hug. Well, that's about all the time I have for my Halloween special. I thank you for joining me. Thank you, and thank you. If you have not yet voted in the election, just know there's only one choice. Other choices, you're a racist, fuck you. And if you make that choice, I will be seeing you again for the Christmas special. If you don't make that choice, you'll never see me again. Can't really see. Where did my goblin hat go? Goblin hat. Goblin hat. There it is. Goblin hat. Greasing's good, greasing's good. Everybody knows the greasing's good. Greasing's fun, greasing's nice. Grease with me, buy some nice rice. A-do-be-do. A-do-be-do-be-do. You're gonna make a Halloween special, and you're gonna clean up the room. You don't wanna leave the room the way it was. That would make you silly Gus. Everybody's gotta clean. Cleaning up the room is a scream. Scream on Halloween. 'Cause you're gonna scream in your clean room on Halloween thing. You know what? I should turn off the organ. Heck, I should play another song. Okie dokie. You made a fool of me, but now those broken dreams have got to end. That's a pretty spooky song. You know, when I first heard that song when I was a kid, I thought Jeff Lynne was saying medieval woman. And I had said to myself, that does sound pretty scary. She must be like a time traveler. Oh, I have unplugged this machine.